Imagine closing your bedroom door, locking it securely, and refusing to open it for a month. Now imagine that month stretching into a year, then 5 years, then a decade. In an era defined by hyperconnectivity, where our lives are broadcast across glowing screens, a silent counter-epidemic has quietly unfolded in one of the world's most advanced nations. In Japan, tens of thousands of individuals, predominantly young men, though increasingly women as well, have retreated entirely from society, locking themselves away in their bedrooms for years, sometimes decades, without stepping foot outside. They are known as the time's Hikikomori, a term that translates literally to withdrawing inward. To the outside observer, this phenomenon is often mischaracterized as extreme laziness, social phobia, or a glorified form of modern introversion. But to look at the time's Hikikomori times through that superficial lens is to miss a profound and tragic evolutionary story. It is a window into what happens when human biology collides head-on with an uncompromising, hyper-industrialized social structure. It reveals the dark side of a society that prioritizes collective harmony and relentless achievement above all else, pushing fragile human nervous systems past their absolute breaking point. To understand why thousands of young people chose total isolation, we must first step back and look at human nature through the lens of evolutionary psychology. Humans are obligate social mammals. For hundreds of thousands of years, our survival depended entirely on our integration within a tribe. Rejection or isolation from the group was, in ancestral environments, a death sentence. Our brains evolved complex neural circuitry dedicated to reading social cues, maintaining status, and seeking belonging. Yet, this same circuitry is vulnerable to a deeply rooted evolutionary mechanism known as the defeat response. In the animal kingdom, when an individual repeatedly loses social battles or faces an inescapable, highly stressful social hierarchy, a biological switch is thrown. Instead of fighting or fleeing, both of which are futile. When the opponent or the system is insurmountable, the animal freezes. It withdraws, lowers its profile, and stops competing entirely. It is a conservative energy-saving strategy designed to survive a hostile environment until conditions improve. Fast forward to modern Japan, and you find a society rigidly structured around exacting expectations. From a very early age, children are funneled through a merciless educational pipeline where their entire worth is compressed into a single score on an entrance exam. Fail that exam, and the narrative of a successful life begins to unravel. Enter the corporate world, and the pressures compound. Lifelong employment, grueling work hours, mandatory after-hours socialization, and an unyielding demand for conformity. For a sensitive, neurodivergent, or pressure-sensitive young person, this path can feel like a trap with no exit. When they stumble, perhaps experiencing a bout of bullying at school, failing a crucial exam, or struggling to secure employment, the weight of shame is crushing. In Western cultures, failure is often reframed as a stepping stone or an individual quirk. But in a collectivist culture where individual shame reflects directly upon the entire family unit, failure feels catastrophic. Faced with this inescapable social threat, the ancient human nervous system does what it was biologically programmed to do when it can neither win nor escape. It shuts down. The bedroom door becomes a physical boundary against a world that demands too much. Inside that room, the threat level drops to zero. There are no expectations, no hostile glances, no comparative metrics, and no crushing judgment. The room transforms into a modern cave of safety. As days bleed into weeks and weeks into years, a strange psychological transformation takes place. The initial paralysis hardens into a lifestyle. The outside world continues to evolve, but time inside the room seems to stand still. The individual relies on parents, usually aging mothers, who quietly slip meals through the door, reinforcing a complex dynamic of protection and dependency, while retreating entirely into the digital ether. Video games, manga, internet forums, and television series provide a simulated social life and a constant drip of low-stakes dopamine. This brings us to one of the most poignant psychological paradoxes of the times, Hikikomori times phenomenon. The illusion of connection amidst total isolation. In their rooms, these young people are simultaneously completely alone and perpetually connected to global digital networks. They can engage with anonymous communities, read complex philosophies, or master virtual worlds. Yet, this digital surrogate fails to satisfy the deep, mammalian hunger for physical presence, shared vulnerability, and genuine tactile interaction. The longer they stay inside, the higher the invisible wall of anxiety grows. Stepping out into the hallway to face a parent becomes as daunting as scaling Everest. Stepping outside into the neighborhood feels like landing on an alien planet. The tragedy of this lifestyle is compounded by what sociologists and psychologists call the Times 80 to 50 problem. Today, many of the original Times Hikikomori Times, who withdrew in the 1990s during Japan's economic stagnation, have aged into their 40s and 50s. Their parents are now in their 80s. This creates a haunting, ticking clock. Elderly parents are struggling to care for middle-aged children who have never held a job, managed finances, or built an independent life. When the parents pass away, the system faces an unprecedented crisis of survival for individuals who have forgotten how to navigate the basic mechanics of daily life. Yet, amidst this sobering reality, a quiet revolution of healing and reintegration is taking place across Japan. Psychologists, social workers, and former Times Hikikomori Times themselves are rewriting the playbook on how to coax these individuals back into the light. And the secret to their success lies precisely in understanding why they withdrew in the first place. Traditional psychiatric approaches that attempt to force socialization, such as aggressive interventions, institutionalization, or demanding immediate job training, invariably fail. They trigger the exact same threat response that drove the individual into isolation initially. You cannot cure social trauma with more social pressure. Instead, modern recovery models rely on radical patience, indirect engagement, and the restoration of a sense of agency. Organizations specializing in Times Hikikomori Times support often begin with what are called rental sisters or outreach workers. These are compassionate professionals who do not try to fix, lecture, or drag the person outside. Instead, they visit the home week after week, month after month, sitting quietly outside the closed bedroom door. They might talk about random topics, play video games through the door, or simply exist in the same space without making any demands. This meticulous process can take 6 months or a year just to get the door to open a few inches. Why? Because the most vital step in healing from severe social withdrawal is rebuilding a sense of psychological safety. The individual needs empirical, lived proof that another human being can be present without judging, exploiting, or demanding conformity. Once the door opens, the journey moves to intermediate community spaces, small, low-pressure environments, often run by former Times Hikikomori Times, where participants can interact at their own pace. There are no expectations to talk about the past, no inquiries about employment status, and no timelines for recovery. They might cook together, play board games, or work on creative projects in silence. Through these micro-steps, the nervous system gradually learns to unlearn its hypervigilance. The brain realizes that the social world is no longer a predator waiting to strike, but a space where it can safely exist. When these individuals finally re-enter society securing part-time work, volunteering, or simply walking through a park without feeling a wave of panic, their perspective on life is often radically altered. Having stared into the abyss of total isolation, they develop a profound resilience. They learn to shed the rigid expectations of a hyper-demanding culture and discover a quieter, more authentic way of being. They realize that human worth is not tied to a corporate ladder or an entrance exam, but to the simple, unadorned fact of existence. Reflecting on the Times Hikikomori Times phenomenon, we are forced to confront a mirror that extends far beyond the borders of Japan. While the extreme manifestation of locking oneself in a room for 20 years is culturally specific, the underlying psychological impulse is universal. How many of us live functional lives of quiet withdrawal? How many hide behind digital avatars, avoid uncomfortable truths by losing ourselves in endless scrolling, or feel crushed by the invisible weights of modern productivity? Modern society has built an environment that often runs counter to our deep evolutionary wiring, demanding constant performance, perpetual connectivity, and an unsustainable pace of life. The Times Hikikomori Times are not anomalies. They are the canaries in the coal mine of the modern human experience. They are the sensitive indicators of a world moving too fast for the ancient biological machinery that carries us. As we bring this exploration to a close, consider the spaces in your own life where you might be retreating, hiding, or bracing against pressures that feel too heavy to bear. Healing does not require monumental leaps or instant perfection. It begins, as it does for those who finally step out of their dark rooms, with a single, gentle breath of fresh air, a willingness to lower your defenses, and the courage to reconnect with the world on your own terms. The door is heavy, but with patience, it can always be opened.